everybody. This is
Hey.
this is and Max from Mysterious Galaxy. Well, I'm from Mysterious Galaxy. Max is our amazing author that we have for tonight. So we have Max Berry in the virtual house. He is here to celebrate his new book, Providence. I'm going to go ahead and let him take it away. He is going to tell you a bit about his book and everything. And also he's going to be answering your questions. So make sure if you have any questions that you put them in the comments down below. And also his book is available for purchase at the link above the video. So thank you so much, Max, for joining us. And you guys are in for such a treat tonight. Have a great event.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So yeah, thanks for joining me. I am Max Barry. I'll be talking a little bit about Providence and sort of, I guess, do a 10-minute reading from the book. But as Constance mentioned, the Q&A part is really fun for me. It's like I get to actually answer questions from other human beings, which is much more interesting for me than just hearing myself rabbit on about whatever else. But look, we're doing this because my book tour for the US was cancelled due to, you might have heard of it, little coronavirus problem that's going around the world. So I would have been in Mysterious Galaxy in the flesh, didn't get to do that, didn't get to visit the US, which is a real shame because it's been a while. I don't get to, well, leave the house for many reasons, but I don't get to leave the country very often either. And so it was really going to be a great chance to catch up with some people that I don't get to see very often, some people who have been coming to my events for a long time, and to meet some new people, which is always a thrill when you're working on a book by yourself for years and years. To finally actually see the people who read it and are connecting with it is one of the great joys of being an author. So I'm sorry we don't get to do that. I'm especially sorry because I was going to take my daughter on this US trip with me. So she is 14 now, and I was going to take her from where we live here in Melbourne, Australia. You might have noticed from the lighting here, it's actually midday here in Melbourne. So we were going to go over to the US, and I was going to get to show her this magical land of America, which is what it's like. It's like, for me, the US has always been this magical fairyland where everything you can imagine comes true in America, in one place or another. There's nothing too extreme that it won't be happening somewhere else. So it's kind of a result, I think, of Australia is quite small compared to the US, not in land size, but in terms of people. And as you keep adding people and they keep packing on top of each other, I think you get these new levels of craziness that you don't get when it's all a bit smaller. So yeah, that's a shame. I mean, I love coming to the US. It's a real experience every time. I find it very stimulating creatively to see what goes on there, and I love meeting the people there as well. So didn't get there this time. Hopefully, I will get there in about a year's time when Providence comes out in paperback, and hopefully, I'm really hoping to have another book out next year as well, which would be super too. But since I can't come and do a tour of the US, I thought we would start with a little tour of my study here. So, I mean, honestly, I don't know how interesting this will be to anyone, but, you know, we have the opportunity, since you have come to me, to do a little reverse tour. And just before, I hope you like, I made the effort to actually put on some of the fancy threads that I had bought for my US book tour that never went ahead. So I had, I don't normally buy fancy clothes because you don't need them when you work by yourself, and no one cares what you look like. So yeah, I went out. I made the effort to make myself a bit respectable, and I've had zero opportunity to wear it until right now. So this is it. Anyway, I'm going to pick this up for a sec, and hopefully manage to keep myself in shot while I take you around. So. This is my little workstation there. I have two monitors because, wait, I forgot the right one. Oh yeah, so there's where I normally sit. Up here is where I'm trying to do it like a standing desk thing because especially as you get older, you notice that sitting down for 8 hours a day is not such a great thing. So I've rigged up my own little thing here with a second monitor up there, and yeah, I try to sort of move between them from day to day. I should explain about this little poster in the background, which is from when my very first novel, Syrup, was published. I was doing a book tour of the US, and Barbara's bookstore in Chicago was hosting me, and they had made this amazing poster. It's got an extra X because I had an extra X in my name for that first book, which was a satire of marketing, and all the characters in it have these ridiculous names to promote themselves. So I thought it would be hilarious if I did the same thing to promote myself on the book. Not really thinking through that theory, because obviously people who just saw the book sitting on the shelves would see the extra X and think, who is this asshole who thinks he's so smart to put an extra X in? Really only you get the joke if you read the book first. So probably not my greatest idea. Little bookshelf. I've resisted the urge to do my whole event in front of the bookshelf like this, because every book author event I've watched seems to have it like that. But yeah, I get to collect all these different editions of my books, which is one of the most fun things. Like, so here is a machine man from, is that Japan? I probably should have investigated this first, but it's just so cool to have these funny little books that yeah, I wrote, but I can't read. They're just awesome. So I've got my syrups over here, some machine mans. This is my Jennifer Government shelf. Jennifer Government went into a lot of different countries, so I've got a lot of different foreign editions of that, which is pretty cool. I've got my companies down here, and a few Providences which have just started to come in. Oh, and a few film things too, because Syrup was made into a film, and so I've got like a prop from it, and the DVD. That's a prop from it as well. So that was like a really fun experience too. Which yeah, I won't talk about any of these stuff in detail unless I get a question about it. But yeah, so there is the office. Over here are my little drafts. Just flip that off. My massive printouts for whatever I'm working on at the moment. So there's like a Providence one here I was just looking at before, and it's just not sure if any of that is high resolution enough for you to actually read, but just the process is you get these, or you print out these drafts, make a million notes on them, go back, rework them, and repeat for as long as it takes until the book actually becomes any good. So yeah, that's the interesting part of my office. I will now do a little bit of a reading from this one, Providence. It'll go for probably 9 or 10 minutes. I have to apologize in advance for the accent, because I always feel like I'm kind of interfering with the process of putting these words into your brain, where I don't want you to hear them in your own head with an Australian accent. I want you to just, get the, I've got a note from Constance. We need an update on the Jennifer Government movie. All right. The Jennifer Government movie. Oh, is this like something I should save up and answer after the reading? Not quite sure about that. I better answer it now because Constance says yes. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, first question is teed up for after the reading. Okay, so yeah, short reading from this. Try to screen out the Australian accent if you can, but I can't fake a non-Australian accent or an American accent, so we have to make do with what we've got here, people. All right, chapter 1, The Encounter. At last it's time, and you file in to watch the contact video. You've seen it before, everyone has. When you enter, you recognize the bulkheads, the fat tube lighting they used everywhere back then, even the black rubber coffee mug that sits atop a panel near the breach chamber's exterior door. But it's different. They said you had to see it for yourself to appreciate it, and they were right. When you turn your head, the picture is all around you. You can walk right into it. You could just about pick up that coffee mug and drink from it. This isn't like what you've seen before. It's like being there. Up front are 4 white-suited figures. Since this is the contact video, you recognize them. Maladanto, White, Esperanza, and Bock. Just standing there, large as life. Someone beside you inhales. A wild compulsion rises in your throat. You should warn them. A man to your right even takes a step and clenches his hands. You knew what you'd be watching today, but you weren't prepared for it to feel like this, like it's wrong to be there. And wrong not only because you know what's going to happen, and not even because there are 4 people who need your help and you can't give it, but wrong like you're intruding. They're about to experience the worst moment of their lives, and you've come to watch it. Fabric suits, plastic helmets. Esperanza is holding a thin stick that functions a little like a cattle prod, and that's the best weapon they have. They're scientists, remember. They went into space to study bacterial growth. Then they picked up a hint of controlled propulsion in a place it didn't belong, and there was no one else for millions of miles. They could have turned tail and run, they should have, but here they are, side by side, with a cattle prod. Their positioning is terrible. That's something you didn't appreciate from the standard video. At first glance, they're poised and ready. But with this much detail, you can see everything that's ready to go wrong. Esperanza is half a step back from where he should be, his weight on his right foot. He's going to get tangled up with Meladanto. It's as clear as day. Bok is supposed to be stationed by the interior door, but she's come too far forward. White is a mess of nerves. His eyes roam the chamber and, aha, a light on that coffee cup. You can see his thought. So that's where I left it. Open it, says Meladanto. Coral Beach's exterior breech door clacks and thumps and splits to reveal a depthless dark. Decompression ripples their suits. White's coffee mug falls off the shelf and rolls toward the void. Steady, says Meladanto. His voice is deep and rich and more intimate than you've heard it before. He's ex-service, the only one of the crew with any military background. Used to fly shuttles back when they needed human pilots. We're making history today. Don't screw it up. Bok lifts a hand to wipe her brow, actually draws the back of her hand across her faceplate, then lowers her arm like she didn't even realize how crazy that was. The wind dies. The doors open as far as they go and halt with a sound you can feel through your feet. It's hollow breathing and nothing else. For minutes, everyone holds position. The standard video skips this. You see the doors open, then contact. Because it's 4 people just standing there. What's to see? It turns out that White swallows repeatedly. He closes his eyes for 10 seconds at a time. At one point, Bok says under her breath, shit, so quietly it's barely a word. A tremor starts in her left leg, enough to wobble the suit fabric. You see these details, and they matter. Meladanto says, where are they? Up in the command station of this little plastic suitcase is De Veers, watching the monitors. He's the youngest of the 5, and when Meladanto ordered him to take the helm, he protested because he wanted to be down here in the breach chamber with them. But only briefly, because De Veers is irrepressibly good-natured, with a grin that never goes missing for long. He's going to die in about 4 minutes. From what I can figure, 2 starboard, 1 aft, 1 port, 1 below, says De Veers. Don't think they've noticed that we opened the front door. For 3 days, they've been tracking a half-mile wide brown rock. All they know about it is it's full of holes and moving like it has some control over where it's going. 10 hours ago, it began to angle toward Coral Beach, as if noticing them for the first time. 60 minutes ago, it exuded 5 small, dark blobs, which sailed across the darkness and stuck to Coral Beach's hull. Since then, the crew has been tracking them, mostly from the sound, which is a clunk, 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 like someone's walking around out there. To your left, a woman stiff-legs it towards the exit. It's tempting to join her, but Meladanto, Esperanza, Bok, and White are there with the breach door open, and you're struck by how they didn't have to do this. At any point, they could have decided to pull out and leave this to someone else. Even now, they could have closed the exterior door and pulled Coral Beach away, and maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe by this point, their fate was sealed. But even so, they stood together and faced it. So you're staying too. Okay, De Veers says in your ear. Seems like they noticed. All 5 unknown objects converging on the breach chamber. You see their hands tighten, the skin crease around their eyes. Esperanza takes a little step to the left, which gets him out from behind Meladanto, and you think, yes, as if there's still a chance. Then he steps right back to where he was. You hear someone moan quietly. There's an urge to blame here, to say, there, that's what went wrong. That's why it happened. Esperanza's positioning. Bock drifting away from the door. There must be something, a mistake, without which it would have turned out differently. Surely it didn't have to be like this. A vibration, low impacts coming through the hole. De Veers's disembodied voice. 10 seconds, boss. Maladanto says, we don't know what we're going to see, neither do they. Let's nobody turn this into something it doesn't have to be. White's lips move fractionally. You always thought he was chewing the inside of his lip, but he's actually mouthing words. When you make out a few, you realize he's praying. A rough, blocky limb appears against the darkness. It curls inside the bulkhead like a tree root. Then another limb, and more, too many limbs. An irregular shape rises into view. There's a rough-hewn head and shoulders and a massive torso, and it looks like some kind of gnarled wood. It's actually translucent resin. You can see a hint of movement beneath its surface, threads contracting and expanding like a bowl of worms. A second shape clambers down from above, senses the gravity and drops to the floor, landing on 6 thick limbs. The tremor comes up through your shoes. Oh God, someone behind you mutters. Maladanto, Esperanza, Bock, and White don't move. That's always seemed remarkable, but now it's flat out amazing. They watched 2 alien nightmares climb on board, and they didn't fall apart and run. The creatures move tentatively, taking stilted steps. Their heads bob. You know what they are. They have several names nowadays, but most commonly, people call them salamanders. You know a lot about them that Maladanto and his people don't. The salamanders seem to notice them. There are moments of stillness. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maladanto raises a hand in greeting. The salamanders don't respond right away. It's not clear whether they understand. Then the first begins to bow. It was standing on 4 hind legs. Now it goes down onto all 6. Its head dips. Maladanto isn't an expressive guy, and even here his face is half shadowed by his helmet. But you can see what's blazing in his mind. He didn't dare hope it would be life, and he didn't dare hope it would be intelligent, and he didn't dare hope it could communicate. He begins to lower his own head, mirroring a gesture he's read all wrong. The salamander's face splits open. What you're seeing is its protective resin breaking apart to reveal its true face for the first time. But to Maladanto, it must appear as if the creature's head disintegrates. Its jaws crack open. It makes a movement in its throat, which has since been named for the noise it accompanies. Huck. And we'll leave it there. If you would like to know more, feel free to purchase the book from Mysterious Galaxy using the links in the Facebook post. But yes, so Providence, where I'll just talk briefly about where it came from before I jump into the questions. I've had a feeling for a long time that I would love to write some sort of book with spaceships and aliens in it. Like I've always been a science fiction writer, but usually I write the kind of story where it's very grounded sci-fi. So it's the real world with some sort of twist on it. Like if it's Jennifer Government, then it's an ultra-capitalist world where Australia is part of the United States and we all live in a free market paradise. But there is no new inventions. It's not a technologically driven book, and it's set right here on Earth. So I've never written a book that's taken place in outer space before, and I wasn't sure I was going to, even though I just adored that sort of thing as a kid. I read so much classic sci-fi in particular. Philip K. Dick, probably when I was a bit older, but really loved his stories. Arthur C. Clarke, Larry Niven, just all these, Ursula Le Guin, just tons of these amazing stories that were the kind of yearning sci-fi where it's like escapist ideas of being taken somewhere else and discovering these new cultures and new threats and all of the mundane stuff that you actually have to go through in your life, like going to school or work, is irrelevant now because you're instantly involved in these bigger conflicts and bigger ideas than you actually have to deal with in real life. So I wanted to tell some sort of story that would capture that excitement and joy that I got from those sorts of books as a kid. But I also wanted to bring a bit of a more modern take to it, just in the sense that I'm sure every sci-fi reader or sci-fi person who enjoys a sci-fi movie or whatever has this thing where, you see a story, you read a story, you watch a movie that you really enjoy, but there's a couple of things you feel like they just didn't get quite right. And if you were going to do it, then you would tweak those things and you would change it. So for me, there's always been a couple of things that bug me in science fiction, even though I just adore it. One of them was the way that sci-fi is still often humans like aiming guns and shooting them like the Wild West, when even today we use computers to aim things and fire drones. We don't rely on humans aiming things unless we absolutely have to, because humans are not that good at it. Computers are much better at figuring that stuff out, trajectories and aiming. So it seems really unlikely to me that in the future we're going to have wars where humans hold guns. It seems unlikely to me that we're going to want to risk human life in any reasonable capacity compared to what has happened before in historically in wars and conflicts. We're going to want to engage in wars from a safe distance with all the drones and the technology up in front, protecting the human lives behind it. Also, aliens. I find that the idea of an alien that's really just a human in an alien suit, or an AI, a robot that's really a human in a robot suit. I mean, I don't want to like write off that whole category, but I find that I'm interested in true alien behavior, because the truth is that if we encounter some sort of alien race, they probably will be alien in a way we can't imagine. Our whole frame of reference is around ourselves, and we can't even go 5 minutes without projecting our own feelings and thinking onto inanimate objects. I have a couple of daughters, and they have soft toys, and you better believe those soft toys are alive with human thought processes and feelings and all the rest. So that's what we do as people. But the truth is that it's a really self-centered view, and it's likely that if we do encounter a truly alien species, then they will think in a truly alien way that we can't follow at all. And in a similar way with artificial intelligence, the way that's evolving, we tend to still want to ascribe human feelings to robots and AIs. And in truth, they also have a really alien way of thinking. So I wanted to tell a story that would sort of fix these issues that I saw in a lot of other sci-fi stories that I still love, but aren't quite perfect. And I also I saw this as a chance to do that, and also have a really, really good deep dive into character, which is something I've become more interested in as I write more. I used to be like 100% a plot guy, and I'm getting more into character. I have like a higher prerequisite for my characters now before I can really enjoy the story. So it's hopefully a novel that captures some of that excitement about the setting. And has some high stakes, but has a really human element to it as well, and hopefully a thoughtful element as well. So I will just flick open my chat now, which I totally know how to do. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. So questions. Number one question is, we need an update on the Jennifer Government movie. Okay. So the history of Jennifer Government, it was my second novel published. It was the first one where I made a serious effort to promote it, because I was really lucky with my first book. I was, just a kid in Melbourne, Australia, who didn't know how to get published. And I basically just Googled or Alta Vista'd, as the search engine of choice was at the time, how do you get published? And found out this process for how do you approach an American agent. You write these query letters, you send them off, you get rejected, you try again. So I went through that and just through pure luck more than anything else, wound up with a really good US-based agent who landed me with a really good US-based publisher. And I kind of thought, well, man, that's it. My career is set. It's bestsellers all the way from here. And as I discovered, that's actually not the case. What you need to do when you are a brand new author that nobody's ever heard of is make people hear of you, because otherwise they don't buy your book. So Syrup, which I hear good things about from the 8 people who read it, but for everyone else who never heard of it, they didn't buy it. So I knew that for Jennifer Government, I had to make some sort of effort to at least get some awareness out there that the thing existed. So I had the idea to create a little web-based game because I program as a hobby. I just always enjoyed doing that sort of building of virtual worlds and making games. So I created this web game, Jennifer Government, and it ended up being very successful. It's still going today. Launched it in 2002. It's still going here in 2020 with more players than ever before. I think there's been more than 6 million nations created. So, you know, for a lot of young gamers, if they know me at all, it's from nation states. It's not from the novels. So Jennifer Government, so the funny thing was where because Syrup sold so badly, that first novel, my first publisher dropped me and decided not to pick up my second book. And I got this news on the same day that George Clooney and Steve Soderbergh decided to option the film rights to Jennifer Government, even though it didn't have a publishing deal. So, and again, this was mainly because I had an amazing agent, not because of anything I did. But so, yeah, it was really exciting. It looked like we were going to get a Jennifer Government movie back in, you know, whenever we're talking now, 2003, 2004. Obviously, that didn't happen. I've discovered that there are so many different ways for films not to get made. For a film to actually get made, you need to have every single thing go right. But for a film not to get made, there are lots of ways to do that. You can have the talent pull out. You can have the script, you know, not really hold up. You can have the new director want to change things. You can have a coronavirus pandemic. There are tons of ways to not make a movie. So most of the time when my books are options, they don't actually get made into anything. So with Jennifer Government, we've gone through a lot of different production companies. It's actually with one now, and you know, I'm quietly hopeful, even though I don't pay too much attention to it, because typically what happens is, you know, it changes so often. I just find it a bit exhausting to hear that 1 minute there's this amazing actor attached and the next minute they're gone. But yeah, it's being developed for a television series at the moment. It's got some great people working on it. So I'm really hopeful to actually see something one day, and I would love to actually see it get made. I think the story would work pretty well. I also find it just so exciting to see other people creating things based on my ideas. Like with the Syrup movie, I just found it magical that I wrote this story, in my car for the most part. And then one day, years later, there are sets and there are people dressing up as the characters I imagined and saying these lines. It's crazy. It's really crazy. So that would be fantastic on a few levels. I can't say if Jennifer Government series will actually make it to air, or, you know, what it will look like exactly. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right, my second question here. Oh, there's so many questions. I better answer these a bit more quickly. Okay, number 2, what gave you the idea for this kind of cold opener? I thought it set the scene of propaganda really well. Were there some other ideas that got cut? I'm not sure who these questions are coming from. Sorry, I don't have names attached to them. Constance is typing them out for me. But thank you for the questions. I really appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. The idea for that scene, which is second person perspective, so it's, you know, you are doing this. The whole book is not like that. It's just 2 chapters. That one was actually, I wrote it and I stuck it sort of in the middle of the book because the way the story goes, there are these 4 people. Most of the story is about what happens to the 4 people on board a Providence-class battleship that is sent into space to defend Earth against this alien menace. And the battleships are enormously powerful, enormously expensive, and they basically take care of themselves. So the role for humans is pretty limited. And the humans on board are aware of this to different degrees, but they are really there to put a human face on the war more than to actually fight it. So the cold open, yeah, this particular chapter was did come around in the middle of the book when we were jumping into the head of the captain of the ship, whose name is Jackson. And she is one of the more detached characters. So you don't really get to know her very well until later in the book. And what is hopefully happening as you read this book is it starts off with a fairly simple idea. You've got these four people, you've got an evil alien empire or menace to deal with. And they are just, going about the day-to-day job of doing that. And then hopefully you discover more depth as you go along and as this story is playing out. And part of that is discovering the motivations of why these people are here and who they are and how they see each other. So for Jackson, she's not really understood by the rest of the crew. And I thought this chapter where you get to see what happened when humanity first encountered the aliens would be a great way to suddenly give you perspective on Jackson's point of view. But yeah, as it turned out, when I move stuff around, I have a pretty chaotic writing style. So it turned out that that it just made more sense to put that right back at the beginning. It sets the scene pretty well. It sets up the idea of who the enemy is really well. So the end of this chapter, you feel like these aliens are just, are terrible and they must be stopped. So it puts you in the shoes of the crew and gives you some perspective on their point of view early. So yeah, to the front of the story it goes. Were there other ideas that got cut? Oh my God, there are so many. As I mentioned, I have this pretty chaotic writing style where I just write and cut stuff. So I'll give an idea a go, and then if it doesn't really thrill me, then I'll throw out the idea, or I'll throw out everything except a couple of sentences that just seem to work. So there are tons of ideas. I usually have at least 100,000 words of cut stuff from every book that goes out. I'm not sure exactly what Providence is, but it's probably in that range. Number 3 question. It feels like to one degree or another, each of your books is about marketing. Is there something to that? And if so, why is that important to you? Yeah, I do this myself. I try to look back and figure out a common thread because I do jump around a bit. And when I start a book, it's just because I had an idea for something that seemed interesting to explore. So I'm not thinking, how can I extend the theme of marketing? I think probably like my first novel was explicitly about marketing. I think all my books have been about perception to some degree, where I'm interested in how we perceive the world in different ways and about how that perception can be manipulated. So marketing is one way to do that. Propaganda is another form of that. And also the way that just people deal with each other and persuade each other and the relationship they have. So yeah, I feel like that's sort of that's a common thread. I feel like the idea of systems, that we build these systems, whether it's a system of capitalism, whether it's a system like artificial intelligence, whether it's a school. I'm interested in how we can create these structures that then influence the people within them. So, and they start to take on characteristics. It's almost like we're building invisible machines. And then once you've built them, then the people who are part of them, you can still take out one person and put in another person, and the machine as a whole still has the same kind of nature. So I'm interested in how people get changed within the machine. Those are probably the most common threads in my writing. But yeah, I'm also interested in how the world influences. Like, I'm interested in the human point of view. Like, it's become more and more important to me to take a particular person and show their journey rather than to jump around so much. So I feel myself focusing a bit more on the people these days. Number 4, what is your daily writing schedule / routine? It's not all that strict. I used to have a really strict routine when I first started. When I first started writing full time, I was so aware of what a privilege it was to be able to do that. I had quit my job, my real job, and moved from one side of the country to the other. My wife was working full time, and we had this deal where I would be able to try writing basically full time. I was working part time as well, but basically writing full time, which was the dream. And I could do it for 2 years, and then if I wasn't earning a decent amount of money out of it by then, I would have to go and get a real job again. So yeah, it worked out for me. I was very fortunate that it did, but I was so intent to make it work at the start that I used to sit down at my desk, keep the same hours I'd had at my previous office job, and I'm pretty sure I even wore like a suit maybe for the first week, just like I used to, because I wanted to treat it like a real job. And I don't know, and I hit a minimum word target every day. So I made sure that I would write 2,000 words a day, which I read was like about how much a real writer should do. And I managed to do that, but I was so unhappy with the quality of the writing I was doing. Just let me fix the lighting here one sec. It's actually gotten a bit sunnier here, so I can't really see myself, but I figured that lighting was starting to get weird. So yeah, and I was writing words, but they were bad words. And I got to the end. I didn't even get to the end. I got to 90% of the way through this novel called Paper Warfare, set in the tobacco industry. And it was just a joyless novel. There was no life to it. So I decided that was not the way for me. I've tried a bunch of stuff since. For me, it's all about finding the joy of the process, where I am honestly interested in what I'm doing and I want to do it. I find that if I can make sure that whenever I'm sitting down at the keyboard and I'm working on a book, it's because I genuinely want to do it, then it works. And if I have to force it, that hardly ever works. It just doesn't. So yeah, the routine I have is really about trying to write each day, but not pressuring myself to absolutely write if I don't want to if this book isn't working, to jump in something else. And that's why it's been forever since my previous book, because I was working on 4 different books at once. Providence was one of them, and as it turns out, it was the one that popped first, but I didn't know that was going to happen. I was just going back and forth. Whenever I would get whenever I'd want to work on aliens, then I would jump into Providence, and whenever that got too much, I would jump onto something else. So yeah, it's not really much of a routine. Everyone needs to find their own answer to that, but I do believe that it's pretty difficult for anyone to write a novel that they're not really enjoying. And I'm a big fan of Delusion too. I feel like you have to delude yourself into believing that this book you're working on is the greatest thing ever done, because otherwise, why are you working on? Why are you slaving away, spending hours and hours of your life, going insane over what's happening in this book? You've got to, and your first draft will be terrible, because everyone's first drafts are terrible. Mine are absolutely terrible first drafts, and I reworked them. But you can't know that when you're working on it. You've got to believe that you are actually working on this incredible masterpiece. So big fan of Delusion, big fan of writing for the joy of it, not so much for forcing yourself to do it when you feel it's not working. In that situation, I feel like, I blame the book too. I feel like sometimes writers will get the idea that, they're sitting down, they're 20,000 words into a novel, which is really commonly a point where writers start to run out of steam for an idea they had, and they're up to around 20,000 and now it's not working for some reason. I always feel like the temptation for writers is to go, I'm not good enough to finish this. I don't have enough discipline. When in fact, it's not your fault. It's the fault of the book. The book has gotten into a place where it's really difficult to push it forward. Difficult for anyone. So the solution to that is not to, strap yourself into a chair and force yourself to write more words. It's to go back and to, look at the last chapter, maybe throw out the last chapter. Maybe you made a wrong turn after 10,000 words. Go back and find the things you love about those first 20,000 words. Keep them, throw out everything else, and try again. Now, obviously, you can take that too far as well and end up finishing nothing. But yeah, that's sort of my process. I'm definitely not going to get to all these questions, so I will try to keep my answers a bit shorter. Number 5, how much of an influence was Ender's Game on Providence? Also, in your mind, are the salamanders malevolent? Ender's Game is a terrific book. It's got some parallels with Providence. probably not in the way that some people suspect reading the book, but it has that same idea of, there's kind of a simulated feel to what's going on in Providence. It's not simulated, but it feels a bit that way because they're so removed from the action. The ship is kind of taking care of most of the battle for them. So yeah, it's a terrific novel. It's an influence, like many other great science fiction novels I've read. Are the salamanders malevolent? I don't really want to answer that because it's kind of a question in the book. But I will say I think they are more malevolent in the way that a storm is malevolent. They're more like force of nature malevolent rather than aware, enjoying cruelty, sort of malevolent. Number 6, I don't want to spoil too much, but I love the parallels you drew between AI and aliens. Well, thank you. Yeah, because that is a huge point for me too, that we essentially have 2 alien species in the book, where one is the salamanders and the second one is whatever the thing is that is running the ship, and very possibly corporations back on Earth, because the premise of the book is that this alien threat has emerged. There is a tremendous response from humanity. Humanity's survival is threatened, so what we do when our survival is threatened is we drop everything, and everything else becomes subservient to defeating this threat. So it's they built these 5 Providence class warships. The AI is smart enough that it performs better than humans in a lot of ways. So the AI gets put in charge of the ships to a large degree. And also, this is like just a sort of a background detail in the book, but it's an important one to me. And that is that corporations are using this AI for their hiring and firing process as well. So the AI will sift through the resumes of applicants. It will decide who to hire. It will decide who should get promoted in the corporation. It will decide who shouldn't. And the result of that is that the corporations are kind of running themselves. The AI is kind of running the corporation, in that humans are making all the decisions on the surface, but they are guided by this AI. So it's become sort of an invisible rising force on Earth as well. And now it's running battleships as well. Number 7, what is the story behind the contrast between the way salamanders and Providence adapt? It felt a bit inspired by supervised versus unsupervised machine learning. Yeah, so the salamanders are quite, they appear quite stupid. They appear like mindless animals, animals more than anything else. But they are very quick at learning as to what the humans are doing, and they do overwhelm the humans in a couple of different places because we're not prepared for how quickly they adapt. Machine learning is something that I've like dabbled in a little bit. It's I program, and I do a bit of statistics and have even created a few models. But the machine learning one is where you basically give a computer a box of pictures of kittens, and you say these are pictures of kittens, and then you give it another box of pictures of not kittens, and you say these aren't. And you just let the computer figure out what the differences are. You don't say, "We'll see the kittens have got whiskers and cute eyes." The computer just like figures it out, and it comes up with its own logic. And the interesting thing about that to me is that it's very hard to then go and figure out what the AI's logic is. It becomes like a black box itself, where you can give it a picture and it will be very accurate at telling you whether it's a picture of a kitten or not. But it can't explain to you how it arrived at that decision. And so that is what's happening with the AI on the ship as well. The crew have to trust that it's making the right decisions. And it always does seem to be, but they can't know for sure. They can't join the dots to see how it got there. So yeah, that is the way that we're sort of going with AI. And it's an interesting field. It's pretty clear that AI is going to replace a lot of jobs and do a lot of things that we didn't think it could. Like, it's happening slowly, but it's happening. I remember thinking that my job as a creative professional would be safe forever from AI, because that's like the last thing the AIs would figure out how to do is to write fiction. And they're still terrible at it, but they're pretty good at writing nonfiction. They can synthesize a bunch of news articles and produce their own news article in a really effective way. So they and that's the kind of creepy but interesting part of AI, that it's kind of stupid, but it's also kind of smart in ways you don't expect. And the threat, of course, is that one day it runs away, and we just realize in retrospect that, it actually got smarter than us 6 months ago, and now we can't tell what it's doing anymore. That's possibly a problem for future generations, but it does seem to be where we're headed. Okay, 8. In one of my favorite passages, you compare the stars to anglerfish luring people to their death. Do you think that a lot of science fiction undersells the inherent danger of space travel? Yeah, thank you for that question. I was just looking at that because I was looking at those notes before of Providence in an early draft, and I had found like the exact page where I came up with that idea. I was thinking about what it's like for these 4 people to be in space, and there's a funny juxtaposition where you sit here on Earth and you look at the stars and they're so beautiful. They're twinkling, and as I mentioned earlier, like as a kid, I just wanted to journey to the stars myself and to see what was out there. I wanted to fly spaceships and discover new worlds. But what actually is out there is just endless death. It's just the Earth is so warm and safe, and everything outside that is incredibly hostile to life. And the complete antithesis of everything we have here. So there is this passage where one of the crew kind of comes to that realization rather abruptly that the beautiful stars are also just incredibly dangerous and hostile, and the environment out there is it's a massive void that is so deadly to humans. Okay, question 9. The Nation States website is how I found your books, even used in the classroom with students. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the Nation States website is something I'm really proud of, because I'm not a programmer. I just do that as a hobby, but it kind of created a platform not just for people playing games, but also for role playing, for creating their own fiction. There's a lot of people who start out just making a country on the site, and then they start to imagine what sort of things are happening in their country, and people are role playing back and forth these diplomatic incidents, and it's amazing. The quantity of words and the quality of the stuff that's come out of Nation States is just been phenomenal. And I didn't plan it like that, but I love how, because I just sort of made this interesting framework for countries that I found cool, that it attracted a bunch of people who had similar sort of interests, who just like that kind of vibe, and then built their own things on top of it. Question 10. Speaking of virtual worlds, do you have a favorite science fiction universe? That's really hard. If I had to pick one, I would have to say Star Wars, because I was born in 73. Star Wars came out in 77. So I watched the original Star Wars movie, 40, 50 plus times as a kid when it came out on VHS. So it was just incredible in how it was so suggestive of all these other worlds. And there's a scene early in Star Wars where it's where Luke goes to the cantina, the Mos Eisley cantina on Tatooine, and there are just aliens everywhere, just hanging out, smoking, arguing, whatever. And I really love how much that suggested of the universe without going into all the detail of who these people are and exactly what are they doing. That's the kind of science fiction I like too, where I don't really need world building in the really detailed sense where I've got to know how everything fits together. I love the stories that are reasonably fast moving and focused on the main people involved, but also incredibly suggestive of how much is going on in the background as well. Star Wars, I still have the figurines and everything else, so pretty hard to go past Star Wars. All right, question 11, why in your car did you write books? This is about how I got started writing. Okay, so the story there is back before I was writing full time, I was a salesperson essentially for Hewlett-Packard, the computer company. And I did this because I did a marketing degree at university, and it seemed like a kind of a compromise between doing something creative, which I really wanted to do, and also something that would get me a job. So I had done a marketing degree. I got a job at Hewlett-Packard, and it was a pretty good job. It was really interesting. I learned a lot that sort of went into the novel company about how workplaces work and how everybody's workplace is this weird bubble of its own customs and rules and things that people consider to be good and bad that maybe don't make sense outside the bubble. Like at one workplace, if you wear your ID tag on your belt instead of up here, then you're kind of like a rebel, and that's like a bit, pushing the line, whereas everyone else outside the bubble doesn't give a crap like where you wear your ID tag. So I really learned a lot from that experience, and I worked with great people. It was an exposure also that I probably got a fair bit of cynicism from, in that I saw some people who were genuinely focused on getting ahead themselves and didn't care about anyone else, and also a fair bit of sort of the boys club at the time that operated in that environment where everyone in the team, high reaches of the team, were sort of the same demographic, and there was a bit of exclusion that went on. So it was an eye-opening experience. It was a good job, but I really felt that it was so pointless, in the sense that I had a sales quota to meet. And what everyone was doing was they were busting their butts to make their sales quota. And then if they did it, then they got paid their bonuses, and the quota was set, their numbers were set back to zero, and off they went for the next financial year. So it felt pushing the rock up the hill over and over. And for me, I've always loved building things, whether it's building novels, building games, just creating something that then lives forever, in a sense. Even if it's a book that no one will ever read, or a game that no one will ever play, I still just really enjoy the process of building it. So I really enjoyed the half an hour I could snatch every lunchtime, where I would be at work, and then I would go grab a pie from the local bakery and eat it in my 1978, I think, Toyota Corolla, which I eventually sold for $200. So it was a real piece of work, that car. And I would write a little bit of syrup, as it was at that point. So I would have 200, 300, 400 words at the end of that day that didn't exist beforehand. And that was really satisfying for me. I actually wrote it in my car just for a bit of privacy. That was the only way I could find a bit of time. And I was using my laptop that I borrowed from Hewlett-Packard, because they very generously loaned laptops to employees for a period of 2 weeks for any reason. And I borrowed one, and they never asked for it back. So I've still got it. It's like this thick, and it weighs about as much as I'm trying to convert pounds and kilograms in my head now. It weighs way more than you expect any piece of technology to weigh. Number 12, I know it was an experimental one-off, but I really, really enjoyed the Daily Machine Man page back then. Oh, thank you. That was an experience, and felt the release novel wasn't even that different. Have you felt compelled to go back to something like that for a bit? So what I did for Machine Man is I had the idea to there was a bit of talk about experimental internet fiction and what were we going to do with this new medium, and I had the idea of drip feeding a story where you would get an email every day with a bit more of the story. So Machine Man was done like that in whatever it ended up being, maybe 180, 200 pages, and it was maybe not that many. I can't even remember, but it was a fun experiment. It was really painful in some ways, because every day I would have to have a page And, you know, in theory, it didn't have to take that long because they were very, very short. I say page, but it could be a sentence. It could be 4 or 5 sentences. And it was, yeah, just that sort of that constant pressure to do something and being unable to go back and change anything. Like, it wasn't like I wrote the story out in advance. I had to think of how I was going to write myself out of the previous problem each day. So it was, yeah, I finished it, and it was really enjoyable for the interactive part, because I would write a page and post it and people would comment on it immediately and I would read the comments. So that's something that I don't get from novels. Normally it's like Providence. I finished Providence, you know, I wrote most of it a year or 2, 3 years ago, and finished working on it a year ago. And only now do people start reading it, and I'm on to the next thing. So yeah, the immediate back and forth with Machine Man serial was great. The finished novel was different, I have to say. I worked hard on that. I discovered that when you put all the bits together and like tried to read them as a novel, all of those little email snippets, it was super annoying because like almost every one finishes on a mini cliffhanger. So when you try to read it as a novel, it's like cliffhangers in your face every 20 seconds, which just gets super annoying. So I did have to work a fair bit on rewriting it for a novel. And I think the novel's like 50% longer or something like that. But yeah, I thought I might do more serials, but I don't think I will now. I think it's just, you know, it's long form novels for me from now on. In question 13, which is probably the last one, because it's 12:58 by my watch and something 58 by yours. The projects I'm currently working on, as I mentioned before, I'm really hopeful of having a book published next year. One of the good parts about working on 4 different projects at once, which is what I've been doing for a while, is that although I don't finish any of them in a hurry, then I have quite a few sort of finishing all at once. So I don't like to talk about things until they're totally locked in, because it seems like every time I jump the gun even a tiny bit and assume that something's going to work out, then it doesn't. So I think part of that is because of the delusion I spoke about before, where, you know, I really do let myself fall in love with my first drafts. And then in theory, at least, I fall out of them for the rewriting process, but still, I don't have any perspective on my own work at all at some point. So occasionally maybe I get a bit carried away with it. But yeah, I'm really happy about the next book. It is science fiction, but not the spaceships and alien sense, more of the stuff, the more grounded sci-fi I've done in the past. Again, something slightly different for me. I feel like people who have followed my books through my career have, I've taken them on a bit of a ride, and they've been really tolerant in that I keep expecting more people to be like, you know, well, this isn't anything about corporations, or, you know, there's no withering satire of the marketing industry in this one. So yeah, thank you if you have read a few of them and come on board for whichever weird tangent I've gone off on this time. And the next one may feel a little bit like that as well. But yeah, it's been a good process. I'm really hoping that it could be published around sort of middle of next year. And maybe I will even get to come out to the US for this book tour that never happened this time. So I think that's it. If you are interested in, let me just close this window here. There we go. If you are interested in purchasing Providence from Mysterious Galaxy, they do have their links on their event page and their website there. Thank you so much to Constance for having me. That was really terrific. I really appreciate the chance to actually connect with people in this electronic way, which is basically all we have at the moment. Yeah, and that's it. All the best.
Thank you so much to Max. This was such a treat. We did have so many questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but I'm going to give Max the link for the video if you want to get to go back and look through more of the questions. But we're going to go ahead and sign off for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good night.